The technology gets there, setting up a framework. The title is Your Mind, Legal Status and Securing Yourself. And give a hand for Tiffany and James.
I'm on? We're on. The first thing we want to say is that we need to put in the standard disclaimer. Both of us are employed, but we don't speak on behalf of our employers. We don't want them to think that. We're not going to break your world. We're just going to make it hurt a lot.
I'm Tiffany Rad, and I'm a adjunct professor at the University of Southern Maine, the Computer Science Department, and I teach a class on computer law, and I also have a private practice in Maine.
I'm James Arlen. Some of you know me better as Myrcurial. I'm a part-time security consultant, part-time CISO. Part-time I write articles for the internets. Mostly I just mess with the world. It's important to understand that data and documents are used as interchangeable terms by lawyers and legislators. They're not always interchangeable, though. So working definitions, data is the lowest level of abstraction from which information and knowledge are derived. So you're thinking bytes, okay? Binary digits. A document is a bounded physical representation of a body of information. So it's a tokenization of what would be a paper document that you'd hold. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't, but it's important to understand the distinction.
We talk a little bit about the difference between a living person or a business organization, and a lot of the law that we're going to be talking about today is about U.S. law. We will mention some contacts from the European Union. I'm actually a dual citizen of the U.S. and of Latvia. I doubt that there are any Latvians here, but Strauchs, in case they're watching. But in the United States, a business organization is treated like a person in many ways. It can be sued, it can sue, it can form contracts. So this is important to us in our talk. We're talking about how an entity can have consciousness and legal ramifications of such. The differences we're talking about here are stored communications. In the United States, we have the Stored Communications Act. When data has come to rest, it has a different type of warrant requirement or subpoena requirement for getting that data, as opposed to when data is in transit. The Fourth Amendment, we're going to talk a lot about the Fourth Amendment here. And the Fourth Amendment, it protects you from unreasonable search and seizure of your possessions. And it only works within the borders of the U.S. If this is at customs and you're a U.S. citizen in U.S. customs, you have more rights than if you're a European citizen in U.S. customs in this respect. And the Patriot Act overrides a lot of some of the Fourth Amendment laws in the United States.
The other thing to remember is that most jurisdictions have an equivalent situation. So this is technically U.S.-centric, but it applies in Canada, it applies in the EU, it applies around the world. There's always this idea of an unlawful search and the rules surrounding what can and cannot be searched.
We are talking a little bit about, in the United States, TSA, the TSA in the United States controls the security. Security in airports used to be privatized, and it's now run and controlled by the U.S. government by far. A Terry stop, we are going to talk about that when there's a reason for you to be stopped and searched. They must have, the law enforcement must have a reasonable belief to stop you. That's something that a probable cause that you have committed some type of crime. And warrants are required. And we're going to talk about third-party permission to search as well.
Your stuff, it gets even weirder. You have a lot of things besides your person. You've got computers, you've got computing devices, you have stuff that is in plain sight, so sitting in the back seat of your car. You have non-related data, so the target of the search may not be the only thing that ends up being seen, and sometimes there's issues with warrants being incomplete or poorly built.
We talk about warrants to external computing devices. We're going to be talking about cell phones and also internal devices, prosthetics, different kinds of medical devices, and warrant requirements for getting information and data about yourself. And later we're going to talk about your thoughts. There actually is technology out there that they claim can read a lot of pre-crime thoughts. Car computers, that's something I know a lot about. I do some hacking of car computers. And with car computers, your European cars, doesn't matter if it's US or European, there is a computer in your car that stores your driving habits. In Canada, and now I recently found in the US, they will give you better insurance rates for your car if you plug in a little box to something called an OBD2 port or CAN. Everything's changing over to CAN standard, which a lot of Europe is on already. But it records such as immediate stops, airbag deployment, how fast you were going. And if you tie that information your car is storing about you in with, we have in the U.S. the Real ID Act, we have a lot of RFID and identification now that as you pass over borders, they will scan who you are. And OBD3, we're hoping is going to not be the way it looks like legislators are making it in the U.S., but that's going to be a standard that will have RFID. And for instance, you can be issued a ticket by passing under a sensor, and your car computer will be able to say, hey, there's a light out, the emissions is off, and they'll issue a ticket without actually being stopped by police. We're hoping OBD3 doesn't go that way. But what's important is what your car is storing about you cannot access without breaking encryption, and then you've triggered the Digital Millennium Copyright Act in the United States. So we're talking about small computing devices, cell phones, car computers, and medical devices.
There's this idea that you can't be forced to incriminate yourself. There's no perfect equivalent for the Fifth Amendment in Canada. There's no perfect equivalent for the Fifth Amendment in most other jurisdictions. Parts of it are covered. It comes down to what do they mean when they say force you to incriminate yourself. But the basic idea is that you cannot testify for the state or the Crown against yourself.
And I have a case just to exemplify with the Fifth Amendment. I'm working on a case right now in Maine. There's a cybercrimes case going on, and one of my students has some interesting code, some research through academia we've done. But if he's asked by prosecution, did you test this on live, on the network, he can say, I plead the Fifth. And the prosecution then has the burden of going out and proving that he did it. They can't make him even on the stand unless it's an impaneled grand jury, but they cannot make him say, yes, I tested it live.
So the law treats data in a bunch of different ways. And for right now, we're driving you through some interesting stuff about data. We need you to think about data that is stored, not data that is in motion, because that's treated differently, but data that's stored. So, it is 2009, the year of cloud computing. I want to store my data on cloud-based application servers in the United States. How am I doing?
This is where we play good cop, bad cop type of thing. Or I play the Fed and he plays someone else. But
the bad guy.
I'm going to answer, if it's stored in the cloud, if you think by distributing your information in the cloud, especially unencrypted, is going to make it so that the law enforcement, if they want it, even across country boundaries, won't be able to get your data, you're wrong. You're owned.
So I'm going to just back up the data. It's no longer a document, because remember, documents and data are different under some types of legislation. So I'm just going to push the data up to Amazon S3, because Amazon never screws with your data.
Right, and here's where I'd say, as a Fed, I'll own you if you do that. With putting stuff, documents, other places, it doesn't matter if it's data or documents in this sense, that they can still get search warrants. And Amazon, also under your terms of service agreements, and Google especially, will readily turn over your information with a warrant. They don't do it without warrants, but they are, well, usually. But they have been known to easily give up information with weak warrants.
1984 is here now, man. So I'm going to rent a server at an ISP in the United States like Rackspace, because they do awesome, good stuff. And that's where I'm going to keep all of my data, the stuff that's important to me.
As a Fed, at this point, I would say you're going to be owned. I'm going to get that data anyway, because in fact, Rackspace might have easier, under terms of service agreements, for me to go in and get that data. If I have a warrant, they're going to turn it over as easily, I think, as Google. So
I'm going to own the server, because renting it is a fool's game. I'm going to buy an awesome